Defendant not guilty or guilty? So say you, Mr. Foreman? So say you all?
So excited. Couldn't have asked for a better outcome.
We waited for this, and justice is finally served.
These amazing supporters. No one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have, and my team. Thank you.
Karen Reed, a defendant no more, found not guilty of murder in her retrial. We have new reaction from Dedham, Massachusetts, including witnesses. And now that this trial is over, what's next for Karen Reed? We'll discuss what's ahead and possible civil cases that are coming up. The government's case against Diddy is also winding down in New York. Prosecutors are expected to rest in the coming days, placing the spotlight on the music mogul's defense case. Our experts discuss expectations for this defense, and attorneys for Bryan Kohberger. They're asking for a trial delay. But was the defendant spotted by a DoorDash driver the night of the Idaho murders? Could this potential witness tip the scales in his case? It's all next, right here on Opening Statements. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julia Janae, sitting in for Julie Grant this morning. Thank you for being with us on this Juneteenth holiday, where we here have had a huge week at Court TV. And here on Opening Statements, just like in an actual trial, we are getting you ready for what's ahead in court this week and next. Let's begin in Dedham, Massachusetts. It's our top story. The center of it all in Dedham is where a jury of 12 was able to do what the first jury could not. Finally, a conclusion in the Karen Reed case after a shocking retrial verdict was read in court on Wednesday.
What say is the defendant at the bar leaving the scene after accident resulting in death? The defendant not guilty or guilty? So say you, Mr. Foreman? So say you all? Jurors, hearken your verdict as the court records that you upon your oath say the defendant on 001 is not guilty, on 002 is guilty of operating in the influence of liquor, and 003 not guilty. Thank you.
You can hear those cheers erupting as the jury returned not guilty verdicts on the counts against her. Second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene. She was convicted of a lesser charge, operating under the influence, and she was sentenced to 1 year probation, a punishment that pales in comparison to the outcome that she faced, a possible life behind bars. So let's go now to what's happening after, the morning after this shocking verdict. Outside of the courthouse in Dedham, Massachusetts is where we find crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who has been keeping us updated on everything in this case. Good morning, Matt. Excellent reporting from you throughout this case. Tell us about the recap of you being there for that verdict.
Julia, good morning. So outside the courthouse here, you still have confetti in the street. You have people yelling as they pass with their cars, honking their horns, and you have media surrounding the sidewalks here in front of the courthouse, where this trial played out for 3 weeks of jury selection, 8 weeks of testimony, and then those 21 hours of this verdict watch over 4 days. This community still coming to terms with this chapter of this long saga, 2 trials total, coming to a not guilty verdict on all of the serious charges, and this chapter finally closing. Well, this community also waking up this morning to big headlines here in the Boston Globe. Reed is acquitted on most charges. Let me show you these newspapers as we talk about this case this morning. You just can't avoid it anywhere. This one is the Boston Herald. Reed freed. That says it all. A lot of newspapers using that same headline. We have the New York Post. They were not kind to her during this trial. Also, Reed freed. Get it up there on your screen. You can see it right there.
We got it.
You know, yeah, I mean, this is just something that people are lamenting in, trying to take in. We don't have another week of testimony. We don't have another day of verdict watch. We are finally able to move on, but I do have to say that there is no closure in this community, no closure for the parties. There's more, and we'll talk about that, but You know, this community still feels divided, and they still feel like they do not have answers. When I bought these newspapers at the gas station on my way here to the courthouse, the attendant was telling me, he was very angry. He said this trial should have never taken place, and in his opinion, his viewpoint, that $1 million should not have been wasted on a retrial.
Wow, wow. The strong words from the people who really feel this in their community, Matt. We saw the reaction a bit from Karen Reed there as the verdict was being read. It looked like she was wiping some tears from the corner of her eyes. What else did we get in terms of this former defendant who couldn't seem to stop talking to the media?
Yeah, last night they were celebrating in the Seaport area. They were celebrating and speaking to the media out in the parking lot, saying that they still want this case investigated. Karen Reed echoed out to the cameras that she has been the most staunch reporter for her former boyfriend, Officer John O'Keefe, and she still wants justice for him. But here during the verdict time, during that reading, you could hear the crowd inside the courtroom as soon as they started to hear those not guilties. Out here, it was just pandemonium. It was almost like a concert or a rally out in front of the courthouse. It took a while for this defendant to make her way down the steps, but she did address her supporters, thanking her supporters for keeping it on social media, thanking the media for covering the case, and of course, her attorneys. Take a listen. Then it was the media scrum. There was probably 30 media members, probably more cameras than that. We were being pushed around. I was being pulled by my jacket by state police, keeping us away from this defendant as she was making her way to her vehicle and then driving off away from this courthouse, possibly for the last time. And I was trying to get the answer to the big question, what is next for this defendant, former defendant? Is she going to stay in the area, or is she going to move on? What will she do now that she has become this sort of true crime celebrity, not only here in the United States, but around the globe, and a face for what this community has asked for in change in policing, and they want to see an investigation. But I didn't get the answer. She didn't answer anything more than what she said on the courthouse steps. The other thing that we didn't see yesterday was we didn't see Hank Brennan or anyone from the Commonwealth address the media. They didn't answer any questions. They went out the back. And then, of course, the O'Keefe family, who have asked for privacy during this entire time, and they still have that civil suit pending. They went out the back as well, and they didn't address the media.
Oh, wow. And Matt, you're so right. Our international viewers, it's been amazing to see their reaction to this case, their interest in it. You mentioned that there's still no closure. I think that's a great way to put it, because for the town, for the parties, but also for these witnesses, are we seeing any reaction from those people who took the stand, especially in the Commonwealth's case?
Yeah, that's a great point, too, because I was also looking for them at the courthouse when, you know, this verdict was imminent. Last year, trial number 1, 2024, we saw some of the key witnesses in the gallery. And remember, they sat with the O'Keefe family, and from where they sit in the gallery, they face the jury directly. And we saw last year it was Kerry Roberts and the McCabe's and a lot of these key witnesses, Brian Higgins, they were in the gallery. We didn't see that this year. But some of the family members and some of these former witnesses did release a joint statement. Let's put that on your screen for you, and I'll read it for you. This is from the McCabe's and the Albert families. This is their statement to Court TV. Today, our hearts are with John and the entire O'Keefe family. They have suffered through so much and deserved better from the justice system. While we may have more to say in the future, today we mourn with John's family and lament the cruel reality that this prosecution was infected with lies and conspiracy theories spread by Karen Reed, her defense team, and some of the media. The result is devastating miscarriage of justice. Obviously, that is their point of view. Remember, it has been a long process for everybody involved, a painful one, but no more, you know, obviously for the O'Keefe family, but this entire community. that has been torn apart by this.
Oh, yeah, Matt. And you've been there for so much of it. I know we have to say goodbye to you. I would say get some rest, but I have a feeling you're still going to be tracking some things down for us. So thank you so much for everything. Let's bring in our guests who are standing by to talk about this monumental finding yesterday. We have attorneys who are no strangers to trial strategy and walking with clients through difficult cases, perhaps like this one. We have Eric Bland, John Phillips, and Michael J. Brown with us. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Eric, let me start with you. I just want your reaction to free Karen Read being a reality.
Well, obviously, it's a jury verdict that was a shot around the world. You're either in the Karen Read camp or you're in the O'Keefe camp. There really wasn't a middle. And what, the statement that was just read forgets that there were 12 jurors with 24 eyes and 24 years that listened and watched, and they made a thoughtful decision. They obviously deliberated for 3.5 days. And I think the defense was very smart in focusing on reasonable doubt on all different pieces of evidence, whether it was the site of the debris, whether it was the potential dog bite on the arm, whether it was some of the testimony given by Jennifer McCabe and Higgins. I think they got away from the corruption of the police investigation from the first trial. It just was really good lawyering on the part of the defense. And, it was a robust trial, and 12 jurors felt that there was significant reasonable doubt. Now, the prosecution thinks that maybe there was doubt, but it wasn't reasonable. But that's what makes trials.
John Phillips, what did you think about the bit of a mixed verdict in terms of not guilty on everything that the Commonwealth charged her with as far as top counts, but they came back with that lesser of driving while under the influence that the defense wanted on the verdict form, but it was the only charge on that form that had nothing to do with a collision between John O'Keefe and Karen Read's vehicle. Your thoughts on them speaking loudly with that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty clear that the state had 2 chances to convict and failed both times. The defense has a definite advantage the second time because they've seen the state's case, or the Commonwealth's case in this case, and I think and you got to look back at the questions and kind of how the jury was teetering here. But, I almost think it was like the slightest little bit of compromised verdict. Like they didn't want to completely say Karen Read did nothing wrong, but they had that. Look, what we've dealt with and what we're going to try to move on from was like one of the classic dopamine hits for trials. We had, cop cover-ups. We had an attractive criminal defendant charged with murder. We had, relationship tension, all of the things that made this so sensational. And guess what? Now we have the civil case.
Michael J. Brown, what's your reaction to the verdict, the way that it came down, and really the way that this jury took their time? And there was a moment where we thought we had a false verdict and then came back and they actually had a verdict.
Yeah, well, I think it was the right verdict in the sense that they have failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, Julie, and that's the standard. And they didn't do it the first go round. And by the way, Hank Brennan, I think, did a great job. And strategically, he left out certain witnesses which were to his advantage. Granted, they didn't get the conviction, but not putting Proctor on, not putting some of the people in that house on, didn't give the ability for the defense to cross-examine them. And they weren't going to call him on their own. So I think he did everything he could have done. On the flip side, Jackson is a real skilled attorney. He did a great job. He created reasonable doubt and hit all the points he needed to hit. And yeah, the jury deliberated. They took their time. That's evident by the 3+ days they took. And justice was served. This is how our system works.
Michael, speaking of those witnesses who were not called, we heard yesterday for the first time in a 2020 exclusive. Michael Proctor sat down with ABC, talked to Matt Gutman, and it's the first time publicly that we've heard Michael Proctor being interviewed, someone who didn't testify this time around. Take a listen.
At what point did you develop such strong negative feelings about Karen Read that you would say things like, hopefully she kills herself, or calling her the C word?
Those feelings developed as the case went on.
I mean, can you see how people might think, he was caught in this instance speaking about a suspect in this way. Maybe it's happened in other cases as well. I
100% understand why people would think that. But when you have, a fellow police officer around my age, 2 kids of his own, it generates an emotion. And I expressed those emotions in a negative way, which I shouldn't have. I shouldn't even, been texting my friends anything. They are what they are. They don't define me as a person. They're regrettable.
Now, Michael Proctor said that he wouldn't do anything different a second time with this investigation because he believes that everything was done right and by the book. Eric Bland, you have represented victims' families in situations where there have been allegations of influence, improper influence on officials. I'm talking about the Murdaugh case. And I'm wondering what you think about Michael Proctor and his role in this not guilty verdict for Karen Read.
And it always creates a sideshow, and the defense attorneys will pounce on that. You can criticize any investigation. No investigation is perfect, but when you have an absolute direct and actual bias that you see, you always feel there may be a bias towards a police moving towards a particular candidate for being a defendant in a murder case. Here, the statements were so inflammatory and so direct and so venal. The C word, and hope she, dies from her Crohn's disease and all this other stuff. It just creates a sideshow that is unnecessary. And police, by and large, are very good. This is an outlier where you see these kind of statements, but it definitely infected the public, and it definitely infected, I think, the jurors.
Eric Bland, thank you so much for your analysis this hour. I know we have to say goodbye to you, but thank you for joining us this morning. John Phillips, Michael J. Brown, you all are sticking around. We have more that we're going to talk about. Karen Read, after the break, is what we're going to be discussing. And here's a look at this verdict in this case. What's next for her? Our legal experts are going to be talking about where she goes from here, what she's going to be doing, what she could face even after this polarizing case has ended inside of a criminal courtroom. And the prosecution could be resting in another case soon. Diddy's federal trial. What can we expect for his defense case? And how will they defend these allegations that we've seen for the last few weeks against the music mogul? That's still ahead.
Because you regret a lot of the choices that you made in your 3.5 years of a relationship with him, right?
I would say that I resent him for leading me into the lifestyle that he led me to.
And you chose to participate in that lifestyle for many years, right?
I would say that my choices were made under a lot of emotional pressure due to my relationship.
Brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Oh my God, this doesn't happen here.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Kohlberger.
You could tell there was some off about him.
He was stalking them. He was hunting them.
Forget about motive. We don't even have a connection.
This trial will be on Court TV.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College Student Murders Trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
Now for what's trending in true crime, it's Karen Read, and the question that many people are asking, what's next for her? To help us figure this out, let's bring in the trial attorneys we have standing by, John Phillips and Michael J. Brown, to answer these questions. So many outstanding questions when it comes to Karen Read. She was, of course, found not guilty on the charges with the heaviest jail time, but she was found guilty on a lesser offense of operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol. She was immediately sentenced to 1-year probation and an impaired driving program there in the state. Michael J. Brown, what does that look like? Let's talk about the fact that she did get a sentence. It was kind kind of overshadowed by the jubilation of the not guilty on really the charges that really mattered in that moment, the Justice for John O'Keefe focus. But what does that look like when you're on probation and you're on this program, and is that going to impact her ability to partake?
I don't think it's a big deal. You're talking about a misdemeanor when you're facing life in jail, Julia. We'll all, John and I would take that every day of the week. So she's going to be on probation for 1 year. Listen, there are travel restrictions on probation, but if you're earning a living, and we can get to that in terms of lecturing and going on appearances and things of that nature, usually the probation officer will consent to you leaving the jurisdiction when you're engaged in gainful employment. But I don't think it would restrict anything in terms of what she's going to try to do.
Yeah, John Phillips, Michael mentioned it. She likely is going to still be something of a public figure. How do you manage that when you're her attorney in terms of what she can say now? Because there are still things that are pending.
I mean, that's the thing. So there's civil attorneys now champing at the bit, writing down everything she said, going through all of her interviews. And now there's no Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is now largely gone for most of the witnesses, particularly Karen Reed, and that civil suit looms large. That said, I think her trajectory is going to be, kind of a high one, where I suspect, knowing her and knowing what she said during trial, she's going to continue and bolster it even more.
Michael J. Brown, anything that you would advise her? I know you've represented so many defendants, but you've represented those who have been in high-profile cases, so they are being confronted by the media. You've been confronted by the media on them. Is there anything that she shouldn't say, knowing that there's this civil case still pending?
She's broken all the rules, but it's worked to her advantage, so I'm not going to criticize it. John and I'm sure, would never advise our client or permit them to go on any of these shows, make any statements while the criminal case is pending. She's done all of that, but she's done it successfully. She got the not guilty verdict, and she is a very intelligent person. She's going to be able to continue to say what she says, which is, I didn't do this. So I don't think there's that issue. I don't think she's going to hurt herself on any civil issue, because she's very careful and is candid in her opinion about what occurred here.
Definitely a different burden, though, inside of that civil courtroom in terms of what can be used and whether or not the other side has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's talk about the civil suit. John Phillips, I know you represent civil clients as well. You've had some historic recoveries for your clients there in Florida. The C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall bars are also named in the lawsuit filed against Karen Reed for over-serving. Dram shop is the legal term that we use for them. Does this still have weight now that there is a not guilty verdict on everything except for the drunk driving?
So let's start all over, right? Now we're talking about the difference between beyond a reasonable doubt, which is just a tough standard, and a feather's tip of more likely than not. And it's how they got OJ. I've had cases where there was an acquittal and then we got a nice civil verdict. Generally, they work better. Justice is spelled one way, but defined many different ways. And these families want justice in the criminal court first, but they get to retry their case. The families, the first time this is their case, will get to try it in the civil case. To some extent, Karen Reed's already teased that, she's the one focused on justice for John O'Keefe. I think you're going to hear more from her about, who should be investigated to try to deflect it further away from her. But the civil case looms large. There's no more Fifth Amendment. It's going to be a big deal.
Real quick before we go, follow up, John, if she starts speaking out in that way, claiming that other people are involved, could she face more liability when it comes to something like perhaps defamation?
Yeah, you've got to be careful with defamation, but she's a public figure at this point, and so they've got to show actual malice, and it's just going to be super contentious. Karen Reed is not going away.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there for now, but both of you are staying with us. We are going to have more ahead for you here on Opening Statements.